Chapter 7 deals with business use of electronic transactions, and more particular, we focus on e-commerce. This is a chapter that's of special interest to me since I also teach BA207, which focuses specifically on e-commerce. So before we get into that, just wanted to touch base again on fighting viruses. How do you protect yourself against viruses? As we've talked a lot about in the class and also in the videos, there are a lot of people out there who really want to do bad things and harm you financially, and you just have to take adequate protection measures, both as an individual and as an employee in business. Every year they rate the top 3 antivirus suits, and it usually includes Norton, McAfee, and Kaspersky. Now, I'm very comfortable with Norton and McAfee. I have steered clear of Kaspersky because they were founded in Russia, and as we've talked about in class, a large majority of the malicious software comes out of kind of that Estonia region, which is an area of the former Soviet Union. So it's in that same kind of area, and it just makes me uncomfortable. Just FYI, in 2017, the U.S. government banned any federal agencies from having Kaspersky software installed on their computers. And as I've mentioned in class before, Comcast does offer the Norton antivirus suite for free to any Comcast subscriber. You can install it on up to 5 devices. So if you're a Comcast subscriber, make sure you take advantage of that free software. Even with the best antivirus software, you can't ensure that you will never get infected. So you need to have a plan B. And the B in this case stands for backup. If you have a good solid backup, even if the worst case happens and your computer gets installed with ransomware and they encrypt all your data files, you just reformat your hard drive, download everything from your backup, and you're good to go. It takes some time and effort to do that, and it's a royal pain, but at least you haven't lost anything. Today, probably the most common form of backup is to the cloud. Obviously, Google Drive is one, and then Microsoft has OneDrive. There are lots of them, others out there. I personally use ID Drive, but you can shop around. There's some really good ones. Now, if you prefer to have a local backup, you can do that, and all you have to do is have a hard drive that you can back up to, and the cost of doing that has become very affordable. For example, this past week at Fry's Electronics, you could get a 2 terabyte external hard drive for $60. And included in that $60 is the backup software necessary to back up your system. So really pretty inexpensive, whether you choose to go with the cloud. Most of the free cloud software that's out there has a limit as to how much data you can store there, so you're going to end up paying a monthly fee for what you get. I believe my account is 500 terabytes is what I have set up on mine. So a hard drive can be a little more affordable possibly, but does take some manual effort on your part. And the last thing I wanted to mention this week really doesn't have anything to do with viruses, other than if your identity is stolen, the criminals can use your identity to open up credit cards and charge accounts in your name without you knowing it. And that can be a problem when you go to open up a new account, or you go to buy a house or to move to a new apartment, and you find out when they run a credit check on you that you're past due on all these bills, and so they won't give you credit. you need to monitor your own credit to make sure that everything that's being reported is correct and accurate. Now, the good news is you don't have to pay for it. We'll cover this in a video and a little more discussion in the classroom, but free credit report, the government requires the reporting agencies to allow you to check your credit once a year for free. There's 3 major credit reporting agencies, so what people recommend is that you do one of the 3 every 4 months. So you might start out in January with Experian, then in May you do TransUnion, and then in September you do Equifax, and then you repeat the process all the way, all over again. The information from one credit agency to another is very close. It's going to be 98% the same from reporting agency to reporting agency. And so if something fraudulent has happened, it's probably going to show up on all 3 of them. And that's why this way, every 4 months, you're able to take a pulse on your credit and to see that everything's okay. Now, when we're talking about e-commerce, you'll hear, just like in business, some acronyms tossed out. B2C, business to consumer. That's pretty straightforward. Businesses are selling directly to the consumer as individuals. Example of this would be Dell Computer. You go onto their website, you purchase a Dell computer directly from Dell. You're not going through any intermediary. Business to business, if I take that same example with Dell, if I have a small business and I want to purchase something, then that's a business to business. I'm not purchasing as an individual, I'm purchasing as my business. Consumer to consumer, the easiest example to think of that is eBay. That's where one end user is selling to another end user, although eBay today has a lot of businesses on there selling to consumers. It's not just in the early days, it was strictly consumer to consumer. Business to employee. Think of this as like the Nike company store. Although they open up the Nike Columbia store and the Columbia Sportswear company store to outside people, and from time to time we'll get an email at PCC say, hey, on this day you can go shop at the company store and get the employee prices on items. The other type of commerce is doing business with the government, and the government has moved more and more to electronic interactions, and they have entire websites set up where it tells you how to do business with the government electronically. Like most things, when you interact with the government, there's a lot of complex rules and regulations you have to follow and be aware of. Doing business with the government can be lucrative, but it also does take a lot of paperwork and diligence to do it correctly. The last group that's mentioned in the textbook is this mobile commerce. More and more people are making purchases not from their laptop, not from their desktop, but from their smartphone. In fact, it's estimated that perhaps this year the number of mobile transactions on Black Friday will exceed all the other electronic transactions. Now, why this is important to us in business is that making a purchase on a little tiny, 4 to 5 inch screen presents some real challenges, and just being able to properly display the items so that the person can accurately see what they are buying, making it easy to input the information necessary when you're dealing with a very small screen and small keys for touch. There's a number of issues around that, so you really have to have thought out your mobile e-commerce website very carefully to make it very easy to use and very easy to see and display the information. So a lot of challenges, but certainly that is the future. Now, when we talk about e-commerce, one other way of doing it, we can, of course, can have, here's the price, take it or leave it. But then auctions, as they were really, made popular through eBay, are used quite a bit. And there's two types of auctions. The first auction is what's called a forward auction, and then there's a reverse auction. We'll take a look at a little chart here right now to illustrate the difference. So in a forward auction, you can see as the time goes on, the price increases. This is the classic eBay. I'm selling something for $10, one person puts in a bid, then another person says, well, I'll pay $11. Then another one says, I'll pay $12, I'll pay $13. And it keeps rising in price until at some point the auction is closed and the highest bidder wins. Just as an aside, if you've ever had a chance to go to a live auction, that can be rather entertaining. I will caution you, if you go to a live auction, and for that matter, even an electronic auction, know what the maximum amount is that you're willing to pay for that item. Oftentimes in auctions, the prices get bid up higher than the item is worth. And so you just need to know when to back away and say, no, that's too expensive for me, even though I really wanted it. But you resist that temptation, because there are people that get so caught up in auctions, whether electronic or live auctions, that in the heat of it, they're not paying attention. They've got their mindset. I want to buy this. I'm going to buy this. Oh, it's only $1 more. No, I'll bid that. Well, no, just another dollar. I'm not going to lose out because of $1, and they keep going, and at the end, they end up paying 50% more than they should have. So just be careful. And the other is reverse auctions. Now, this is just the opposite, as you would guess from the title. As time goes on, the bid price goes down. This is typically when a business or the government will put something out to bid and say, I have a job, submit your bids, and the lowest bid gets awarded the contract. Now, this can be done with businesses as well, saying, I would like to purchase some items that meet these specifications. Give me your best price. And then whoever has the lowest price wins that supply contract. Purchasing agents love to use these. When I was in business trying to sell stuff to other businesses, I hated it when my customer used a reverse auction, because it's very difficult. Oftentimes it was not apples to oranges. My product was far superior than the competition, but purchasing was just looking at this one attribute, the price, instead of looking at the total cost, features, and benefits. But in reality, you have some, especially large companies, that insist on using the reverse auction bid. Some of the challenges we have with e-commerce are based on technology. There's still, when you look globally, just like we talked about when it comes to security and other issues in global business commerce in general, there's not a one standard that everyone in the world agrees to. And so because we don't have this universally accepted security standards on how to make sure that we're keeping these financial transactions safe, there's some problems there. A big issue is also that we don't have the bandwidth to handle all these purchases. Now, this is not so much an issue excuse me, in major U.S. cities. Although it can be an issue as you get into outlying areas of this country, but it's certainly an issue when you get outside of the U.S. and Western Europe and other areas around the world. If you have all these fancy high-resolution graphics on your e-commerce website, it can take forever to load a page, and you will frustrate your customer that's trying to buy an item. So you have to be aware of the bandwidth requirements when you're setting up your website, and especially graphic images are killers. They can just suck up a lot of bandwidth loading that page. And of course, with things like the Americans with Disabilities Act and other things that require us to really be thinking about accessibility. What do we need to do, to our e-commerce site to make it accessible for someone with limited vision, or someone who's colorblind, and so you have to think about that, and of course that adds cost to your overall e-commerce website. But then there are also some non-technological issues. One is this perception out there that e-commerce is unsecure. I think in reality, e-commerce is just as secure as if you go and buy the item at your local store using a credit card. I think their systems are just as easily hacked as if you buy it online with Amazon. But a lot of people perceive that doing stuff electronically is less secure. My older sister refuses to purchase anything online for that very reason. Doesn't matter what I tell her and say, they're convinced that that's just not a secure way of doing things. A big issue has been that the whole concept of e-commerce really developed fairly quickly, and the government, in their usual incredibly slow to respond, has not figured out that they need to do something. The federal government is responsible for regulating interstate business. So a company in one state selling in another state, the federal government is supposed to be overseeing that. But now all of a sudden we had a business in one state selling to other customers all around the country, and the government did not address the issues there. A lot of municipalities and others complained that this wasn't fair. If a company could ship items to people and not charge the local sales tax, that was depriving those municipalities of revenues, and it was also making the local businesses that had to charge those taxes less competitive. To the best of my knowledge, the federal government still has not stepped in to resolve that issue. But what has happened with that is that Amazon has gone ahead and started charging sales tax in those areas. Now the good news is, if you want to set up your own e-store, you have this great idea, or even if you just want to sell some odds and ends that you have left over, maybe in summertime you like to go to garage sales, buy stuff and then resell them. There are just dozens and dozens of really easy to use companies that will set you up with your own e-store. These are just 3 of them that I've had interactions with. Yahoo Small Business, GoDaddy, and Amazon. They can get you set up. Amazon is more expensive, but of course Amazon has the customer base and reach. If you use some of the others like Yahoo and GoDaddy, you basically have to do your own marketing to drive people to your site. But there's a lot of really inexpensive solutions out there, and they've developed all the tools. They've optimized it for mobile transactions. Everything is all built in, so it's really a turnkey situation. So when we talk about business to consumer, electronic malls, what's meant by that is a situation like Amazon. When you buy products on Amazon, you are not necessarily buying from Amazon. You think of Amazon as the shopping mall, and there's all these individual stores that are selling through that shopping mall, but they are they're independent of each other. Now Amazon does have their own products, and so some of the items you buy are really from Amazon. Some of them Amazon is just the storefront connecting you to the merchant. Now, another interesting thing I find in e-commerce is this idea of luxury items. Now, if I'm going to pay a lot of money for something, like these Fabergé necklaces, would I buy it off of a picture on a website when I know that Photoshop can make it look absolutely marvelous, wonderful, vibrant colors when it really isn't? I wouldn't. But as you can see here, this is a real live website where you can purchase Fabergé items online. I guess some people are more trusting than me. Securities trading. Uh, and we'll actually cover this a little more in class. But with the e-commerce, there's a lot of things we can do today that were difficult to do in the past or expensive to do in the past. Securities trading is one of them. It's very inexpensive now. $4.95 to do, to trade a stock. My trading account is with Fidelity. There's some of the funds in there that cost me nothing. There's zero charge for me to buy and sell that particular security. One that's really important to you, and we will talk a lot more about this in a subsequent chapter, is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is viewed as a service to the job market. It's a way that business professionals can connect to companies, recruiters that need some talent, and be very appropriate for you to talk about in your group presentation. As I said, we'll talk more about this. Travel services. Now, it used to be you had to go to a travel agent to get things booked. Now you can do everything online. You can do your shopping, comparison. It's certainly a lot easier today than when I first started traveling. A big one is, of course, advertising online. And that's one of those good news, bad news. Some of the websites I go to take so long for the website to load because of all the doggone ads that have to load. Drives me crazy. But it is also a way that you can reach hundreds of millions of people very cost effectively. And the last one I think we're all familiar with, cyber banking. And even to the point where there are banks now opening up that do not have an actual physical branch store location. Everything is done online. I love it. I very seldom go into my branch location anymore. I do everything online. I pay my bills online. My paychecks are deposited through direct deposit. And even if someone writes me a check, sends me a check, I deposit it using my smartphone. So there's really very little reason for me to go into the branch location. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about online advertising. One form of advertising are called banner ads. And so this is an example. Up at the top of the page on CNN, you've got this thing that's an advertisement for Merrill Lynch's retirement vesting program. There's two types of advertising methods. One is called pay-per-click and the other is pay-per-impression. What pay-per-click means is every time someone clicks on your ad to go and see more information, you have to pay that website a certain amount of money. It might be a penny or 2 pennies, depends on the ad and what their readership is. The other is pay per impression. And in this case, it doesn't matter whether the person actually clicks on your ad. It's just how many people saw your ad show up on the website. And depending upon how well you know your market and can target your advertising, you will choose to use either pay-per-click or pay-per-impression. pay-per-impression is less expensive than pay-per-click, because a pay-per-click, you know that person expressed an interest, whereas the pay-per-impression, all you know is that someone saw it and they may have immediately dismissed it as, why am I interested in that? But again, that depends upon how well you understand your market, and you will choose the one that's appropriate for your particular situation. Now, you also sometimes, the banner advertisements are off to the right instead of across the top. I kind of prefer the ones, when I've done banner ads, I've always gone for the ones on the right. They're not as obtrusive, and I don't think as irritating to people as the ones across the top. But the next one I'm going to show you, if you can at all, avoid, and that's pop-up ads. I hate pop-up ads. They're an irritation. You know, the pop-up ad comes up, the first thing I do is click the X and say, get out of here, because it's covering up the website that I'm trying to look at. At least with the top and the side banner ads, I can see the information I want. The ads are off to the side, not impeding my view of the material I want. So one of the issues we have in e-commerce, or as is called, like on this slide, e-tailing as opposed to retailing, is this idea that we have two channels. We can sell stuff online on a website, or we can sell it offline, which would be at a store. So how do you integrate those two? Some of the challenges we have to deal with is order fulfillment. What I like is a lot of stores have gone to where you can order something online, and if you decide, oh, that wasn't what you wanted after all, or it doesn't fit, you can return it to the local store if there is a brick and mortar store in your area. That's a great integration of the two channels of both online and offline selling. But another issue we have electronically is when you have clothing particular. How do you do dressing rooms, or how do you do custom fit clothes in a virtual situation? You know, you can't try it on and see how does that thing, you know, look on you. And we'll actually look at some innovations that are happening in the clothing industry and clothing retail industry to show you how you can get around that. Okay, as I mentioned a couple slides ago, Amazon has taken on the sales tax issue since the government was not addressing it, had not stepped up to the plate. They finally said, okay, we're just going to start charging sales tax everywhere. Now, they started initially with a few states that were complaining the most, and now they have done it to all the states except for the 4 states, Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, and Oregon, that have no sales tax. By the way, there's a trivia question you can use at your next party. How many other states have no sales tax besides Oregon, and who are they? Another term you'll hear tossed around is disintermediation. Boy, that sounds like something really exciting. It's really simple. There are multiple ways that you can get a product from the manufacturer to the consumer, and each of those channels has its pros and cons. And as a manufacturer, I have to be careful that I don't disrupt one of the other channels by something that I do. So here's a chart that just kind of shows we could, as the producer, sell to a wholesaler, it sells to a retailer, goes to a consumer, or we can skip the wholesaler, or we can go ahead and sell directly. So this bottom one, so this is Dell selling directly to me. Or in this case, this is Dell selling to Costco, who sells it to me. Now, I just purchased a new laptop this year, And I looked at purchasing it directly from Dell or purchasing the same model from Costco. By buying it through Costco, I got it for $100 cheaper, and I got a 2-year warranty instead of a 1-year warranty. Now, as a manufacturer, I have to be careful. I may love Costco because they just sell a ton of stuff for us, and so they're doing great. But as a manufacturer, if I start selling directly to the consumer at less than Costco is selling, I can make Costco mad at me. I can be undercutting their business. And of course, Costco can choose to then start carrying HP or some other brand computer if I don't service them. So I have to be careful when I offer promotions to the wholesalers or to the retailers that I don't upset the other channels in getting the product there. Certainly, today's age, we have a lot of user-driven content. The first one that really started this all out, of course, YouTube. There's just a lot of user content on there. We could list on their Facebook and dozens of other websites, blogs, social media sites. And the real key here is, like we were looking at, what's called Web 2.0 and going into Web 3 and Web 4. This idea that we have this dynamic, interactive means by which people can share their opinions. The problem for us as retailers is someone can post a negative review about our product or company on Yelp or Amazon, and it may be incorrect. They may be biased. It could be a totally bogus, made up. It could be someone that's just mad at me. It could be my competition trying to give our products and services a bad name. And it's very difficult to get those malicious reviews and posts taken down. And so that's a challenge for us doing business electronically, is it's very easy to post bad reviews even when they're not deserved. One of the things the book, this chapter covers, is this idea of electronic exchanges. Just 3 basic types of vertical exchange, as it says, that's the same industry. Horizontal exchange is when you have an item that goes across multiple industries. So these are commodity items. The automobile industry uses bolts. The airline industry uses bolts. The home industry uses bolts. The computer industry uses bolts. So you have these commodity items that go across multiple organizations, multiple markets, and you have companies like Global Sources that is an area that you can go to find all these commonly used bits and pieces that are not specific to any one particular market or industry. And the other type of exchange that's mentioned is functional exchanges. And this is when you have temporary help. One of the website's employee, that's one example. There's, account temps, a number of ones where they're looking to provide temporary sources of employment. Probably the first that started all off, manpower, but that's what's meant by a functional exchange. Okay, we're all familiar with electronic payments, credit cards. Now, one thing I did want to mention is this idea of a virtual credit card. I love it because it's a credit card number that is created for a single transaction. And once that transaction happens, that credit card number is no longer valid at the bank. So you don't have to worry about someone stealing your credit card number because you request a virtual credit card number for each transaction you're going to make on a website, each electronic purchase that you make. As far as I know, there's only one bank offering that. I think it's a very intriguing idea. Electronic cash. There's a number of apps now on the phones where you can send cash to a friend. Certainly the stored value money cards, those cash cards in the grocery store, you have to be careful with those. Some of those have a pretty healthy fee attached to them. So you buy a $100 Visa credit preloaded credit card and the person may only get $90. Let's see. The transaction flow. We'll cover this in the classroom, a little bit more of going through all the steps that happen when you make that purchase at the store. It's a lot more complicated and complex than you would think. And consequently, there's a number of places where the transaction could go wrong. Fraud on the internet. You know, we've talked a lot about this in the class. The investment scams. Probably one of the first that made really news and headlines was the Nigerian scam. You know, you get an email from someone in Nigeria, they're trying to get money out of the country because of the revolution, and you know, they'll be happy to, you know, share 10% of the $100 million with you if you just give them your bank account info so that they can conveniently go in and empty out all the money that you currently have. Amazingly, people still fall for it. Another legal issue we have with e-commerce is domain names. And this is where your competition can end up, you know, selecting a domain name very close to yours. And in particular, if your company name has an unusual spelling, your competition might purchase a domain name that has the spelling that people might make, you know, that they would carelessly misspell your company name, and so that they can actually get your customers that way. So when you're setting up your business's website, you're looking at, that's one of the things you want to look at. What are all the ways that you could mistype our company's name and website, and do we want to go ahead and purchase those domain names and then just have them all of them redirect to the correct website? Cyber squatting is this concept that I'm going to go out and I'm going to buy a domain name. I have no intention of using it, but I think it's a cool name, and I bet someday someone's going to want that. And then they'll come to me and say, hey, they'd like to buy it. And I'll say, well, you got $1,000. And so it's, you know, again, it's this concept that you purchase that domain name when you have no intention of using it because you believe that someone will want it in the future. Now, in my case, I had purchased some domain names that I thought I was going to use, but as it turns around, I never got to using them. And then lo and behold, I got notified by someone that they were interested in purchasing my domain name, and would I be willing to sell it for $500? And I said, well, sure, I'll do that. Now, I hadn't intentionally, you know, purchased that to create that situation. It just worked out that way. We've already talked about the taxes and fees that need to be addressed by the federal government if they could ever start doing their job instead of getting caught up in all the silliness that seems to be going on in Washington, D.C. these days. Copyright is also an issue. We've talked about that in class. The issues around copyright and how you have to be careful what you put up on the web, that you are only using material that you have permission to use or material that you have created. And there we have it. That's chapter 7, e-commerce. As I indicated, we'll go into a little more in depth in the classroom.